Ladies and gentlemen, I proudly present the President of the United States. The assassination of John F. Kennedy remains the greatest murder mystery in American history. Decades later, people still search for answers about that tragic day in Dallas. Especially now that Donald Trump has released the JFK files. Everyone wants to know what the newly revealed documents really say about that moment that changed the world. In the hours after the shooting, the Dallas police threw everything they had at solving the crime. But at the same time, they were completely unprepared to handle the overwhelming flood of reporters and national attention. Suspects were pulled in, questioned, pushed, and shoved before cameras. Lee Harvey Oswald himself protested that he wasn't given proper legal representation. The chaos only fueled the mystery. For most people, the name Lucien Sarti means nothing. It's a forgotten footnote in the long, tangled world of drug smuggling and organized crime. A name that quietly passed through French police files and South American ports before ending suddenly in a Mexico City raid in 1972. But for a certain part of the JFK conspiracy world, Sarti's name carries a far heavier, meaning the name of a man many believe may have pulled the trigger that changed American history. Sarti was born in France in 1937 and grew up inside the Corsican underworld. The Corsican mafia wasn't just powerful, it was global. By the 1960s, they dominated heroin routes stretching from Europe to South America, feeding the infamous French Connection pipeline into the United States. Sarti wasn't a street thug, he was a trafficker, a smuggler, and if rumors are true, a trained killer. His run-ins with police were constant. In 1968, he was arrested in Argentina with drug world figures Auguste Ricord and Francois Siapi after being linked to a major bank robbery. But like ghosts, they walked free for lack of evidence. That became the pattern. Arrested, questioned, released. His world ran on bribes, corrupt officers, and a criminal network powerful enough to erase problems before they became threats. Even when a Brazilian officer was caught taking money to release Sarti from jail, nothing stuck. Nothing ever stuck until 1972. That April, Mexican federal police raided a drug operation in Mexico City. Shots were fired, chaos erupted, and when the smoke cleared, Lucien Sarti was dead. No trial, no statements, no chance for him to answer the accusations that were coming. 16 years later, his name exploded into the public again. In 1988, writer Steve J. Rival published a book claiming that Kennedy's assassination was carried out not by a lone gunman, or the Soviets, or the CIA, but by 3 Corsican hitmen hired by American organized crime to protect their drug empires. One of those hitmen, he said, was Lucien Sarti. Rival's story came from conversations with Christian David, a legendary figure in the French underworld, a trafficker, a killer, a man who knew every corner of the heroin pipeline running through Latin America. David claimed that in 1963 he was offered a contract to kill an American political figure. When he asked who, the answer came in a cryptic phrase: the highest vegetable. There was only one man in America who fit that description. David said he declined the job because it was too dangerous, but he claimed to know exactly who took it in his place: Lucien Sarti, along with 2 other Corsican gunmen. Men so familiar with killing that this assignment barely stood out. According to David's account, 2 weeks before the assassination, Sarti flew into Mexico City, crossed into the United States through Brownsville, Texas, and was met by someone tied to the Chicago mob. They hid him in a private home, no hotel records, nothing traceable. They studied Dealey Plaza. They measured distances, angles, escape routes. They prepared the perfect crossfire. And on November 22, 1963, while the world focused on the Texas schoolbook depository, Sarti supposedly stood behind the wooden fence on the grassy knoll and fired an explosive bullet. The fatal shot that shattered Kennedy's skull from the front. If true, it would change everything. But almost immediately, the story began to crack. One of the men Rival accused, Salvador Perante, immediately produced military records proving he was serving aboard a minesweeper on the day of the assassination. The French Ministry of Justice confirmed the second alleged shooter, Roger Boccagnani, was in prison at the time. Both insisted Sarti was also behind bars in Marseille's Beaumetz prison. If all 3 men were locked up, then none of them could have been in Dallas. Some researchers argue those alibis were forged or tampered with. Others insist they are ironclad. Sarti couldn't defend himself. His silence became part of the legend. Then came another twist: recordings allegedly left behind by E. Howard Hunt, the CIA operative involved in Watergate. After his death, his sons claimed he left tapes suggesting a conspiracy involving Lyndon B. Johnson, CIA officer David Phillips, mob enforcer Frank Sturgis, and possibly Lucien Sarti. But Hunt's widow and other children said the tapes were manipulated, taken from a man whose mind was fading. The Los Angeles Times reviewed them and called the evidence inconclusive. That word follows. Sarti, everywhere. Inconclusive. His death barely made news in the United States. French papers later claimed he was eliminated as part of a combined operation between the mafia, U.S. narcotics agents, and international police. According to those reports, the goal was to crush Corsican control of the heroin trade and hand the business to American-Italian families like Trafficante and Marcello. If true, Sarti didn't die in a random raid, he was removed. And if JFK threatened those networks, even indirectly, the theory doesn't feel as far-fetched. Christian David also claimed the assassins hid for 2 weeks in a private home after the shooting, then escaped into Canada, where the mob helped them fly out of North America without ever using their real names. Could it be true? Could a French hitman, barely known to the public, have fired the shot that changed the world? Or was Lucien Sarti simply a convenient ghost, a dead man whose name could be inserted wherever the story had gaps? Like every part of the Kennedy case, facts blur with rumor. Names appear, disappear. Evidence is found, lost, rewritten. Yet Sarti remains one of the strangest figures drawn into the mystery. A trafficker tied to the French connection. Killed before he could speak. Accused of the most shocking crime of the century, never proven, never disproven. That's why his name endures. Because the truth about the Kennedy assassination lives in the shadows. Somewhere between official reports and whispered stories. Between the grassy knoll and the bullet fragments that still don't add up. Lucien Sarti exists in that same shadow, half criminal, half myth. Maybe he was nowhere near Dallas. Maybe he stood behind the fence. Maybe he was just another name, swallowed by a conspiracy that refuses to die until undeniable evidence appears. One question will linger in those shadows. Who was Lucien Sarti? And did he pull the trigger that changed the world?